Like and subscribe to Sinister Shadows Studio, The Whispers of Wraithwood Mansion. It was an offer I couldn't refuse. Stay one night in the abandoned Wraithwood Mansion and walk away with a small fortune. Friends warned me about its cursed history, but the allure of easy money, combined with my skepticism of the supernatural, pulled me in. The mansion stood tall and imposing, its grandeur faded by time. Ivy and moss covered the cracked walls, and the windows seemed to hide mysteries behind their grimy panes. Pushing the massive front door open, I entered into a world that felt frozen in the past. The main hall was adorned with dusty chandeliers, portraits of stoic faces, and a grand staircase. I decided to set up camp in the main living room, which boasted a giant fireplace and age-worn furniture. With just a backpack, sleeping bag, and some provisions, I planned on spending the night reading by the fireplace. But as the sun set and the mansion was draped in darkness, I began to feel unease. The first sign of the mansion's secrets revealed itself in the form of soft whispers. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the hushed tones persisted and grew louder. They seemed to come from all directions. I tried to dismiss it, reminding myself of the money at stake. Curiosity got the better of me. I followed the whispers to the grand ballroom. The chandeliers shimmered in the moonlight, and for a moment, I thought I saw shadows dancing on the floor. I shook my head, scolding myself for letting my imagination get the better of me. Returning to the living room, I decided to light a fire to keep the cold at bay and to dispel any lingering fear. But no sooner had the flames taken hold than a cold gust of wind blew in, extinguishing the fire and plunging the room into darkness. I scrambled to grab my flashlight. It was then I felt a cold hand grab mine. Gasping, I yanked my hand back and pointed the flashlight in the direction of the touch. There, standing right in front of me, was the translucent figure of a woman in a long flowing gown. Her eyes were hollow, but her lips moved in a silent plea. Panicking, I bolted for the door, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. I tried another route, but at every turn, the whispering grew louder, and more apparitions appeared, some mournful, others aggressive. Desperate, I ran to the study and barricaded myself inside. Through the door, I could hear the echoes of a bygone era. Music played, glasses clinked, and people laughed. The mansion was reliving its golden years. Perhaps I could appease the spirits if I understood their stories. The study was filled with journals. I selected one at random, dated 1857. It belonged to Lord Wraithwood, the original owner. He wrote about a grand ball he had hosted, and of his beloved wife, Samantha, who had tragically died that night. Rumors said she was murdered, but her killer was never found. Lord Wraithwood became a recluse, and the mansion was believed to be cursed. The more I read, the more I felt a connection to these lost souls. Samantha's spirit was the woman who had reached out to me. She wasn't trying to scare me, she wanted help. And if the journals were to be believed, her killer was still in the mansion. Determined, I emerged from the study and confronted the spirits. I spoke directly to Samantha, promising to help her find peace. To my surprise, the atmosphere changed. The whispers grew soft and guiding. Following their lead, I was taken to a hidden chamber behind the grand staircase. Inside was a skeleton, clutching a dagger and a locket with Samantha's portrait. The real killer had been trapped here, meeting his end in the very place he had taken Samantha's life. With the discovery of the killer's remains, the mansion came alive with ethereal light. The spirits began to fade, their stories finally acknowledged. Samantha's spirit approached me, her appearance now radiant. She mouthed a silent thank you before vanishing into the light. Morning broke, and I found myself standing outside the mansion, the doors wide open. The curse was lifted, and the mansion no longer felt like a prison. I never claimed the money. The experience was payment enough. Some say I was a fool for not capitalizing on my night at Wraithwood, but I had helped lost souls find peace. And in doing so, I found my own. Maria's Labyrinth. From the moment I first laid eyes on it, the old Carver Mansion, situated on a remote hill, had always intrigued me. Its darkened windows and ivy-clad walls whispered stories of bygone eras, while its abandoned state whispered even darker tales of neglect. One summer evening, fueled by a mixture of curiosity and bravado, I decided to explore its secrets. As I approached the mansion, a sharp wind blew, making the ancient wooden door creak open, as if inviting me in. The interior was grander than I'd imagined, with high ceilings, intricate woodwork, and dust-covered furniture draped in white cloths. Despite its abandoned state, I felt an unsettling presence, as if the house was very much alive and aware of my intrusion. It didn't take long before I found a portrait of a beautiful woman named Maria Carver, the last known resident of the mansion. Legend had it that she'd vanished without a trace, leaving behind a house full of sorrow. Her painted eyes seemed to follow me as I moved through the rooms, making me shiver. Drawn to the grand ballroom, I was taken aback by the sight that greeted me. There, at the center of the room, was a magnificent mirror, its frame ornate with silver and precious stones. The mirror seemed out of place, its surface pristine amidst the decay around it. Unable to resist, I moved closer to inspect my reflection. To my shock, the face staring back was not my own, but Maria's. Her pleading eyes met mine, and an icy hand reached out from the mirror, pulling me into its depths. I found myself in a disorienting maze of mirrored walls, with no discernible way out. Panic surged within me. Every turn I made led to another reflection, and Maria's tormented face was everywhere. Her voice, filled with anguish, echoed around me. "Free me. Free us." Desperate to escape, I tried to retrace my steps, but it was in vain. Just when I felt hope was lost, an old, fragile voice whispered in my ear, "Follow the music." Confused but willing to clutch at any straw, I strained my ears. Faint piano notes drifted through the maze. Relying solely on the ethereal tune, I navigated the labyrinthine corridors. The music grew louder and more frantic, guiding me to the heart of the maze. There stood an old grand piano, its keys moving on their own, playing the haunting melody. On the piano bench was a dusty old journal. Picking it up, I skimmed the pages. It was Maria's diary. The entries detailed her love for a suitor her family disapproved of. In their desperation to keep them apart, her family had commissioned a cursed mirror to trap her essence forever. Her lover, a talented pianist, had tried to free her using the power of music, but was caught and killed by her family. The final entry read, "Only by uniting our souls through the melody he played for me can the curse be broken." With determination, I began to play the tune I'd followed. The mirrors around me shimmered, and the maze started collapsing. Just as the last note rang out, I felt a force propel me back into the ballroom. The cursed mirror lay shattered on the floor, and the spirit of Maria, radiant and smiling, stood before me. Beside her was the translucent figure of her lover, hands still poised above phantom piano keys. They shared a tender embrace, their souls finally reunited. "Thank you," Maria whispered before they both faded away, leaving the Carver Mansion truly abandoned for the first time in centuries. Emerging into the dawn's light, I couldn't shake off the night's events. The mansion's foreboding appearance had changed, its aura lighter. The whispers of old had been replaced by a serene silence. While many would deem my experience a nightmare, for me, it was a poignant reminder. Even in the darkest places, love's melody can pierce through, guiding lost souls home, echoes of the forsaken. When I was a child, my grandmother told me tales of the old Holloway Mansion, perched high on the town's outskirts. She said it was a place where the past refused to die, and where the voice of a woman named Rachel still echoed. Years later, with my childhood fears forgotten, I found myself standing before the mansion's decaying gates. A journalist by profession, I had returned to my hometown to document the mansion's history before its impending demolition. Pushing the creaky doors open, I stepped into an atmosphere heavy with dust and memories. Faded portraits hung on the walls, watching silently as I passed. The air was punctuated by a coldness that went beyond the autumn chill outside. Drawn to a soft melody, I followed the haunting notes to a ballroom where a broken gramophone sat playing on a loop. I turned it off, and in the sudden silence, heard soft sobbing from upstairs. Remembering the tales of Rachel, I hesitated, then decided to investigate. Climbing the grand staircase, the weeping grew louder. I entered a bedroom where the remnants of luxury and decay intertwined, and there, reflected in a cracked mirror, was the image of a woman. Dressed in early 20th century clothing, she stared back at me with sorrow-filled eyes. Our gazes met, and I instinctively knew her name. Rachel? She nodded, her reflection shimmering like a mirage. She beckoned me to approach. As I drew nearer, she motioned to an open diary on the dressing table. The entry spoke of a love affair between Rachel and a man named Thomas. They planned to elope, but Thomas mysteriously disappeared the night before their planned escape. The final entry, stained with tears, simply read, "I will wait forever." Suddenly I felt an icy breeze. The room darkened, and the walls seemed to close in. Whispers filled the air, recounting tales of betrayal. Rachel's reflection became anguished, her voice joining the chorus. He promised, she repeated, her cries becoming more desperate. Determined to free Rachel from her torment, I scoured the mansion for any clues about Thomas's fate. In the study, I found a letter hidden in the pages of a worn-out book. It was from Thomas, confessing his love for Rachel, but admitting he couldn't go against his family's wishes to marry another. He hoped she'd forgive him and find happiness elsewhere. Armed with the truth, I returned to the bedroom. Rachel's spirit seemed more restless, the room's atmosphere more oppressive. Holding up the letter, I read it aloud, hoping its words would grant her peace. As I finished, the room grew silent. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a soft golden light. Rachel's reflection in the mirror now looked serene. She mouthed a silent thank you and faded away. But as her image disappeared, the mansion began to quake. Cracks spread across the walls, and the floors trembled beneath me. Realizing the mansion's imminent collapse, I dashed towards the exit. With every step, the structure groaned, as if in pain, resisting Rachel's departure. Bursting through the entrance, I barely managed to escape as the mansion crumbled behind me. Its long-standing edifice, built on both grandeur and sorrow, was finally put to rest. Days later, as the debris was cleared, workers unearthed 2 skeletons, their bones intertwined, holding onto each other even in death. The town murmured about Rachel and Thomas, and how love and betrayal had bound them together beyond the grave. The Holloway Mansion was no more, but its story, particularly of Rachel's undying love, would haunt the town's tales for generations to come. The shadows of Anthony's Keep. The mansion had always been a landmark of our town, perched atop the lonely hill that overlooked the dark woods. Locals called it Anthony's Keep, after its last known inhabitant, a reclusive old man named Anthony Harrington. Having recently inherited the mansion from a distant relative I'd never met, I decided to pay a visit. The grandeur of the mansion was still evident, though time had gnawed at its once majestic facade. The windows were broken, shutters hung loose, and the entrance bore scars from countless storms. With an uneasy feeling, I unlocked the main door and stepped into a large hall. The dim light unveiled a vast expanse of rooms lined with ornate wooden panels. Above the fireplace, a dusty portrait of Anthony glared down, his sharp eyes sending shivers down my spine. As night fell, the mansion revealed its first secret. Soft whispers flowed through the corridors, growing into murmurs that seemed to beg for attention. Following the sound, I reached a sealed door, the only one locked in the mansion. Unable to resist, I picked the lock and stepped into a dimly lit study. Books and journals were scattered everywhere. The whispers grew louder, guiding me to a diary centered on the mahogany desk. It was Anthony's journal. His writings painted a tale of love, jealousy, and darkness. He spoke of an entity, a shadowy figure that had tormented him since childhood. Every night the shadow would take a more solid form, growing more real and terrifying. Anthony's sketches of the entity were grotesque, a man-like figure but with elongated limbs and hollow sunken eyes. The last entry, dated mere days before Anthony's mysterious disappearance, read, "It comes closer each night. I can feel its breath. I fear I have only one night left. Suddenly, the room grew cold. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a shadowy figure shifting. Turning around, I found nothing. The anxiety welled up, my heart raced, and the whispers intensified, filling the room. Determined to uncover more about the shadow entity, I delved deeper into the journals. They revealed rituals and incantations Anthony had practiced in hopes of warding off the entity. One ritual, marked as the last resort, seemed promising. It required a mirror, a silver pendant, and a drop of the haunted person's blood. Gathering the items from around the house, I set them up as instructed. Drawing a small drop of blood from my finger, I watched it ripple into the mirror's surface. The whispers converged into one deep, resonant voice. "Release me." Bracing myself, I began chanting the incantation. The mirror's surface wavered, and the room darkened. Within moments, the entity from Anthony's sketches appeared in the reflection. Its hollow eyes met mine, filled with rage and desperation. But as I continued chanting, the figure began to contort and shrink, its form getting trapped within the silver pendant. With a final scream, it disappeared, leaving the room in a stunned silence. Feeling a weight lifted, I left the study, sealing the pendant safely within. Exhausted, I fell into a deep sleep in one of the mansion's many bedrooms. The next morning, with sunlight filtering in, the mansion seemed less menacing. Before leaving, I took one last look at Anthony's portrait. This time, his gaze was soft, almost grateful. Deciding to turn the mansion into a museum, I left the sealed study untouched, a testament to the legacy of Anthony Harrington. The pendant remains there, a silent guardian ensuring the entity never breaks free. Visitors to Anthony's keep often report hearing soft whispers, but they attribute it to the wind or their imagination. Little do they know the true darkness that once roamed its halls and the sacrifice made to imprison it. Like and subscribe to Sinister Shadow Studio.